This one, 3:00.
Reset those.
Call the meeting to order. Motion to approve the minutes of April 10th, 2025 and April 17th, 2025.
You want them separate or together?
Same. Both at the same time.
I move to approve the minutes from April 10th and April 17th.
Do we have a second?
Yeah.
Have any discussion? Favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
That's
Minutes are
what happens when it auto tracks.
Wow, that's like a, amusement park, right?
I think that's why. That's why IT, yeah, made it focus.
Have any public comment?
Focus on it.
Any public comment? Any public comment? Comment is closed. So bad. We have a request to move Fine Sheriff to the #1 position as he has a commitment he would like to attend. Everybody okay with that? Okay. You're up.
Anyone want to go to a baseball game with me?
Is it baseball or softball? Baseball.
High school baseball.
What's right?
Varsity. Well,
Cool.
he's a junior. And I guess we'll have in Webster tonight, which is an hour and 45 minutes from here.
It's a ways.
Ways. We go monkey foot off, head up there.
You go take a squad car, you get there quicker.
Okay, I'll try to make it short and sweet. I guess I'll start chronological. So we're talking about paying a wage for chief deputy position. I guess we started, I should rephrase that. I started with wanting to keep the chief deputy on the union wage increases. Board decided to place them on the Carlson Detman wage scale. Although I disagreed with it, probably the right to do. Then I asked for step 11 and the board disagreed with it. Then I asked for step 7 or disagreed with it. Since then, I've still been doing most of chief deputy. Since then, I've had a lot of talks with Matt Wycheck at work, outside of work, in person, on the phone. I know he isn't thrilled with step 5. I think talk into it. He wants what's best for our department, ultimately. I guess I'm hopeful that we'll allow him to receive step 5 or pay.
So I thought you guys could negotiate up to 5 on just amongst yourselves.
So there is an ordinance that says, so yes, you're correct that we typically can do that, step 1 through 5. But there is an ordinance that says that all appointed officials, the wage has to be set by the county board with approval through personnel. So after reviewing that ordinance more with Ashley, it does have to come back and the board has to set some sort of wage, even if it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is. If it's above a 5, that's where it has to go through all of the other processes like oversight committee to personnel to finance to board. So this can just go straight to board, correct? Yeah, so this can just go straight to board from personnel to board, and board does have to approve that final appointed wage. But yes, typically for a normal hiring process, 1 through 5 is what the department head and HR could agree upon.
But it's because this position is appointed by the sheriff.
Correct. They're not hired by our,
It's appointed at all. All of our appointed positions, yep, go through that same process.
Thought that appointed officials, by definition, as far as the county is concerned, are those that are appointed by the board, not by the,
Our ordinance specifically lists the chief deputy.
does it list in?
Yeah, I can pull it up for you.
I'm just curious because that board doesn't really appoint.
so that was my bad at board meeting. I didn't know that existed, that it listed that chief deputy. I was thinking the same thing as Mr. Willingham, like it's not appointed, so we could offer him 1 through 5 on the back end, don't have to take it through any more committees. But then Ashley and I talked afterwards and
Does it have to go to finance now?
no, it would just go straight
Straight
to the board. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Can I motion?
You can.
I make a motion that we approve step 5 for the chief deputy with no side letter, and that we forward it to the county board for approval.
We have a second.
Do we need this no side letter in there? We already motioned on that side letter issue of it, right?
Are you referring to when he said something about that he would get automatic increases or something like that?
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure
That
that,
that's clear.
yes,
And I did talk with him too, saying there is not gonna be any side letters like there used to be.
just so there's no question.
I'll leave it that way.
Yes.
Sorry, I just,
I have a second.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Any more discussion? Favor say aye.
I,
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. You. Been on a journey.
Yeah, I don't wanna go through it again for several years,
Huh?
but
Nice work on talking to him though.
See, you eat too much spinach.
broke my hand.
That's in your budget.
I was just gonna say that.
Well, actually, it's brand new. I just really didn't put the screws in it. Thank you.
Back up to the top, Health and Human Services request to fill vacancy for elder benefits specialist. You can sit there.
Right there.
All right, so I'm here today because Fawn Armstrong has given notice. She is taking a job in Barron County, and her last day is going to be May 22nd with us in Bucks County. So my ask today is to recruit to replace that position. She is.
And then I get the,
It's like 60% Medicaid drawdown.
Yeah. Sorry, Laura. It was like about 85% grant funded,
there's no budget impact. Okay. With the levy impact.
about 15% for the,
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
mean, it's
minimal.
not all over and above.
No.
Anything that's already there.
But I do think that it is a very important position in our agency to have, absolutely. So
Yeah. Take care of us, old people.
I was actually really shocked because when I sat down with one to ask, how many
That
people
direction.
served this year already, it's 240.
Really?
Since 1/1, she said 240 appointments already this year. So she is knocking it out of the park. That is a very important position that we have. So
actually, can you explain this a little bit? It says the position statutorily required.
So when I was talking with Kathy, it's, the grant funding that we accept, that position is required to have with the grant funding. So I think statutorily in the ADRC, which is supposed to be there. That's what Kathy said.
I think if we don't have the position, don't we have to partner with Barron County on that?
Not quite sure how that would work.
It says you have to consult a contract with outside agency or vendors. Cost
We
hired.
would have to do something to serve that population.
So I move
Was
to,
it the same? I'm sorry, go ahead.
you go ahead.
Go ahead.
So, is this basically the same as what Fawn was getting? Like that, I mean,
So I guess I don't know what Fawn is leaving at, but the wage that I put down up to, there was step 5 on the wage scale, that was and offered was up to step 5. Ashley, do you know what is leaving at? I don't know the answer to that.
But it could be hired at step 1.
One's wage?
No,
This is step 5
Right.
on our wage scale.
But when you-
So that's as high as
right.
we're authorized to go.
When you recruit, it could be less than this if you don't start the person at step 5.
Correct.
It's the maximum starting wage.
right, so I'd like to hear, I guess, what Fawn was making.
I just, at the step number, I got her wage. Fawn is at a 5.
So it's just. Then I'd have to ask, so this new person that you want to hire, I mean, are they capable of jumping right into this? And
This is a request to recruit.
I haven't even recruited yet. This is just to be able
The request to fill.
to fill it.
This is just to
You don't have any
advertise to
internal
replace the.
You don't think you have any internal? No, okay.
So I make a motion to refill the position.
Motion's been made to.
I would second.
To fill. Have a second. Discussion. Favor say aye. Opposed.
Thank you, everybody.
Good luck with recruitment.
I'll flip it tomorrow. Thank you.
Conservation and zoning request to fill vacancy for LCD admin assistant.
Okay, we have an opening, our administrative assistant slash information and education coordinator took another position in Sawyer County. And so we're simply asking to replace that position. Yes, I can add that Rachel, the previous person in that position, apparently misses us and wants to come back into that position. So I'm asking, I guess, we are allowed to refill the position with Rachel. You're right back in exactly the same as when she left 2 weeks ago.
that's the 2091, all the same.
Everything is the same.
Andy,
Make that motion.
I'll second it.
discussion? Lucky you.
Yeah.
And so, and just, I mean, yes, just to clarify, as part of the discussion, the position is opened back up. If for some odd reason she doesn't want to come back, she changes her mind, is the position still open at that rate? I mean, can we then recruit, or do we need to come back?
Well, you have to put it, I mean, don't you have to
I mean, maybe.
Interview.
advertise it, don't you?
Well, I don't know. I guess that's a question for Ash.
Everything?
So I did talk to court counsel ahead of time for this, and he did say that it would be up to you guys as a committee if you wanted to. You can make your motion right now to approve filling the vacancy for this position and offering to the previous incumbent is what I would say. And I think what you're asking is, say the previous incumbent changes her mind and says, hey, I'm not going to take that. Then we would go and post it and go through the interview process. But you guys as a personnel committee could decide just to offer it right back to the previous incumbent and not have her. That's why I'm assuming that person would just start right away next week or whenever proper notice is given, wherever.
So should we amend the motion then?
Because in a sense, right now, we're just approving to fill a vacancy form.
Well,
I mean, that doesn't mean we're,
is.
right, but that's the way I kind of took it, sorry.
Kathy.
So I would like to get Rachel back possible. So my motion would be to the latter.
Request to fill the vacancy position and offer to the incumbent.
Previous incumbent.
Yeah.
But then if she doesn't take it, then to go ahead,
Post it.
go ahead and post it.
We have a second for that?
Let's second it.
Tom did?
I did.
Oh, okay. Any more discussion?
So I have some discussion.
All right.
So where are we at on the grant funding of this, Nick? Cause I remember when this position first started out, it was totally grant funded. And we had to allow some leeway so that this would go up to 50%.
About 20% is zoning.
But we gave a leeway as to how much percent could be levy on this position.
I believe that was the 20%.
Okay, so we're maxed out there now. The original motion when we started this was gonna be grant funded only.
Started out that way, but that position has morphed into really being important to help out zoning division as well. And it just seemed fair that if she is spending time on zoning, that the county has some skin in the game.
And then also she was going to do some educational. Did that take off for you?
Especially with her background. she's-
And I shouldn't say her, I should say this position, sorry.
Her in particular, with her background, has been really, really critical for us in terms of developing new information and outreach material and planning for activities and community outreach events.
And because I'll be honest, the reason I'm questioning, because it seems like maybe a little heavy there sometimes, but it's your department, but seems like that the department's maybe getting a little full. I don't know how I don't know how I want to word that. I thought maybe we were, at times I've questioned myself, is that department getting a little top heavy on employees for what we're gonna get done there? But if you say it's, obviously you're here because you need it, that's why I'm questioning it.
I think we do. I really think that's an important position for a lot of different reasons in the office. It just fills a lot of holes and gaps and helps out with.
Any more discussion?
From the zoning division alone. Actually, I think when we combined the two departments, we ended up with one less position in zoning, did we not?
I don't know about when it was combined, but I know a few years back.
We had a zoning administrator, an assistant zoning administrator, and we also had a,
Because of some funding cuts, we had to get rid of a position. And it was about a year or two later when we were able to sort of refill that or get that position back, and that is the position that Rachel occupies. That is this position, right?
but the only 20% of her position is.
Right. The previous, under the previous paradigm, that position was funded about 40% from the DATCAP SWRM land conservation grant. And that's what went away, that back in 2021. They got rid of funding that third position, so we had to give that up for a little bit until we could find a way to refund the position under a different sort of funding model.
I think you and I actually, when we were on zoning, Dave, made, I remember the discussion, you and I might have made the motion in a second at that time to put this in place for the grant.
So is there a chance you're gonna lose some of these grants, though?
These particular ones, no, not in the short term.
Any more discussion? We have a motion and a second on the floor. Favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
Thank you.
Admin coordinator.
Or is that all?
Pardon?
We have a forester?
Oh. Land conservation, okay, request to fill forest. What's that?
So Jared is in Milwaukee for personal reasons and he was going to call in, but it doesn't look like he will make it. And I texted him and he's not getting back to me, so I'm not sure how you want to handle this one. So he might have just tried. Yeah,
Okay,
I'm just not sure how you want to proceed without the department head.
We just bump it and see if he manages to call or we're done.
what do we do if he doesn't call in? I'm unclear on that.
If he doesn't call in, it's really up to the body's discretion whether or not you want to postpone and wait for the department head to come, or whether you want Ashley and I to give our opinions. It's really up to the body how they want to move forward.
Okay,
There's no levy impact.
Personal opinion, professional opinion is that might be a little misleading. There's no levy impact. Yeah, so stumpage is used as a levy reduction. So in my opinion, saying there is no levy impact is not entirely accurate. I wrote a little something up on that. So the stumpage revenue that we make as a county isn't a silo only for the forestry department. It contributes to our entire general fund and is used as a levy reduction. So that means that it's money that the county needs to pull from the taxpayers. So when we say that wages in the forestry department are paid from stumpage, what we're really saying is that stumpage revenue is diverted to forestry to cover the wages rather than being used to reduce the levy across all departments. So for example, if we were to not fill a forester position, the stumpage revenue currently covering that position could instead go towards something else.
Unless there would be less stumpage because there's one that's forester out getting those trees cut, right? Well, I know they don't cut them, they mark them and oversee them and do the bids and everything else. I know they don't. They make it so that they are can be cut.
Right. Yeah. I guess my point was when saying that it's not levy is a little bit misleading because if stumpage didn't come in, if we had a horrible stumpage year, the levy is the backup.
Yeah, I'm a little confused why this isn't listed as levy. I mean, why isn't there a levy for this position? And
the stumpage is a revenue.
stumpage is a revenue. And with, yeah,
Yeah.
They take
I'm a little, when I first saw this, I'm like,
the balance.
We
Wasn't,
thought the same thing when we saw it too, Mr. Meyer.
I suppose in theory, it is that way. Just like another department may have the position and then it's 50% grant funded and 50% levy, but here it's the whole budget.
They take all their expenses out of what they make and then the balance is what gets transferred to the general fund.
because I guess where I'm going with this is, I don't like it being listed this way. I think it should be in a department's budget levy. Because if you, for some odd reason, heaven forbid, don't sell any stumpage, you're gonna take this out of general fund to cover it somewhere. I guess I never realized this was
I think the
this
real,
way.
for me, the real issue that is sort of confusing is when we adopt a budget in November, we're adopting the whole budget, but we're only looking at the net levy. So it might show $100,000 is what's coming out, net levy, but that department may be spending $500,000. The other $400,000 from other sources of revenue. So people don't really see what the total cost of the department is.
Yeah.
They only see the portion that's coming from the levy. So that's kind of misleading, I think.
I would agree. That's where,
Yeah.
because when I see that we're estimating on, when we do our budgets, I see that we're estimating this much stumpage revenue to come in. I don't necessarily look at, oh, well, these expenses are still coming out of that yet. Because I'm looking for employees' wages to be built into the budget for the employee to be there.
So I guess I think it's important that we hear from Jared how much this position contributes to the success of the sales.
Yeah,
That's, I agree.
Revenue.
I mean, and are you saying this is not a, salary is not a line item on the
I agree.
personnel side of it?
Probably it should be a levy. As opposed to,
That's the problem is that when we talk about the levy, we're only talking about our share. We should be talking about the whole budget. So it shows up in the budget, but because the stumpage covers the entire cost of the department, then it doesn't show up in the levy.
Right.
And I suppose you could assume that you're paying this wage out of previous stumpage in the first place. We're not, this is not a pay-as-you-go program throughout the year. There's reserve funds, so to speak, in the general fund that are greater than the amount of stumpage that was taken out by the county from the general fund, right, Jim? From finance standpoint?
Well, like I said, yeah, but I don't look at stumpage as, when I look at that budget, I look at that all being built in there and the estimated stumpage revenue being not necessarily any costs coming out of that at the end of the year. It's an estimate. And that I don't like, back to your point, I don't like a wage coming out of an estimated budget line.
Why wouldn't this, and I don't want to belabor it because you guys know more about it than I do, but why wouldn't the stumpage go into the kitty and his salary just be a line item on the levy?
Dave, it's been that way since I started. I don't know.
That's not the way the budget is presented.
Right, the forestry budget is presented as a levy reduction. That section of our budget, the conservation and development section of our budget, is a levy reduction.
That's based on anticipated income.
Yes, it is. Which
And actually finance, a couple of years ago, we adjusted that because it used to be what we felt a somewhat inflated number.
That's hoping the check is in the mail.
So we adjusted that down, especially kind of after COVID came along and
Yeah.
timber wasn't moving.
We do the same thing with sales tax.
True.
A lot of counties, the amount of money that they put into the budget against the levy this year is the actual sales tax amount that was received, not last year, but the year before.
Well, and the money we're getting this year is from bids that are already in place. So
Well,
you have a,
But it depends on the markets today. So even though the sale was sold 4 years ago.
You got to remember that those timber sales are not a year.
they're 3 to 5.
Yeah, so you might be getting revenue this year from a sale
Well, that was paid
2 or 3 years ago.
So the state provides funds, is it only for Jared's position?
Correct. It's 50% of his salary and benefits.
But we should postpone this.
Well, I think it's probably best to see if the department head can make it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Get the link for. You call them on the speaker. They can all hear them.
Okay.
Do we have any data? Because we've been short-staffed in that department numerous times on what that has done to our stumpage sales, Ashley.
We were short-staffed when I first started in 2022 and they had record timber sales that year. But again, a lot of factors that went into that, I'm sure.
Hello,
Hey, Jared, you're on with the Personnel Committee.
excellent. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
So, not sure how this works, but I'll jump right in. I'm requesting to fill forester position Roy Zubrod announced his resignation a week or two ago, his last day being May 16th. 40-hour-a-week job. Should have the filled out form in front of you. This position establishes a large portion of our timber sales every year, as this job is almost 100% timber sale establishment, which is what brings in the money to my department. So I guess if there are any questions, I can take them. Otherwise, that about wraps it up. That our starting pay, well, Roy is currently at approximately $27 an hour. He's taking a job starting at the DNR for $4 more per hour. Price County's forester is making $29.71. Sawyer's at $28.92. Mayfield at $37.15 an hour. Oneida $28.72. I might have said that already. Lincoln $32.58. So we're paying kind of low, as everybody already knows, and I know there's not an easy solution, but I just wanted to let you know that. And I hope you make a motion to fill this position.
You got any questions?
I have one, cost shifting. Says if the position's unfilled, the department will have to consult contract with outside agencies. What would that entail, Jared?
I have no idea. I don't think any counties right now are consulting for timber sale establishment. But if we don't have this position to do it, we still have to get it done, or we're not going to make as much timber sale revenue.
Then I got another question. As far as timber sale, so this isn't under county tax levy. I guess this one kind of threw me for a loop. You've got it listed as county other timber sale revenue. So how is this listed in your budget?
The budget's kind of weird because the way the timber sale revenue goes in through the forestry page, it offsets everything there. Just because we've been making surplus money in recent, probably for 20 or more years, I'm not sure. It appears that it's a no-cost position, and I would argue that it is a no-cost position because he sets more than enough timber sales to offset the cost of the employment. Self-timber sale revenue, I suppose it would be a levy position, as there are no grants for that position. Like my position is 50% funded by state grant. So that's what I have for you.
So I guess,
Cleared up at all, or?
well, a little bit. So how's this listed on your budget though? I mean, do you have this position listed? And it's part of your yearly budget you present? Or are we just winging it and absorbing it later on out of timber sale revenue?
No, it's pre-budgeted for sure. As all the positions in my department are.
The problem is that counties don't know how to deal with departments that don't lose money. So we have a department that makes money and we can't understand that, but it does. So.
Sure. Well, if you don't want to make money, we can forget about hiring a new guy.
No, what I'm saying is
I
that
mean,
He's talking administratively.
yeah,
With the
we,
dollar.
when we ordinarily, put out the expenses and the revenues, and then the
Yep.
levy covers the difference. In this case, the levy covers, or the levy doesn't cover any difference because there isn't a difference. So.
correct. With the markets, maybe in 5 or 10 years, who knows? Potentially our timber sales won't cover it, and it will be an expense. But I think we'll continue to meet that
Part of the
$1 million
levy,
mark.
part of the levy.
It's used as a levy reduction. So if we have a bad timber sale year,
levy.
we're pulling from the general fund to cover that because we're,
Yeah,
The levy is the difference between the expenses and the revenue. You have,
you're right.
And ultimately, if we didn't have, say we don't have that position, so we have extra timber sales revenue, that money is gonna go to fund a different position, because it's gonna go back into the general fund and it's gonna fall off.
So we're just keeping it at all.
The way. I was gonna add, we budget revenue. So in effect, it's a non-levy position because it's covered by the budget with expected income. Of course, that comes with a caveat, as Ashley said, if we don't make the money, then it's a totally different story. But
So I'm sorry, actually, can you go back up? So Jared, this is a Forester 2 position. I can't very well, but, and you have another one that is not filled. Is that right? What's the fourth line there
they chose to hire the forestry tech
instead?
in lieu of, so that person, Jared, right, that person can do parks and forestry duties, and they were graded higher, a little bit higher.
yeah, when Nick Wilson left, we decided not to fill the parks assistant. Instead, we filled the vacant forestry technician.
So that if this position is not filled, it falls on you and Dane to do what this position would do. Is that correct?
you know, it won't get,
Sure, that could be assumed. Me, Dane, Jake, and whoever else is still around.
So just, 'cause I'm dumb on this, this department gets rolled up into the levy, you end up with an X number for levy. And then you take the anticipated lumber sales and deduct that, and that's your new levy number.
So for instance, here on this line, Jared's total budgeted expenditures for 2025 are $406,000. If we didn't put stumpage revenue of $467,000 into this budget, it would be levy. But the policy of the county for however long, decades, I'm sure, has been to put stumpage revenue into the forestry budget,
Okay,
which, right, wrong or otherwise, that's how it
Right.
works. But yes, if we budgeted 467,000 and we only made $250,000 on stumpage this
you'd
year,
have $250,000 out of the general.
yes,
well, yeah, and the levy limit might come into play as well.
correct.
So Jared, can you kind of walk us through what this position does and why?
Sure.
Yeah, why you think it will impact your revenue if it's not filled?
So we have foresters that look at our forest recon data. It's housed on Whispers, which is managed by the state of Wisconsin. Me, Dane, Jake, and Roy all have clearances in there to look at it and edit it. I do a tiny bit at this point. The two foresters do a vast majority of all timber sale establishment, which would be they do all the pre-work, cruising the timber to verify that it's actually ready for a harvest, putting in the line boundaries for the timber sale, cruising a volume cruise for an estimate for the timber sale prospectus and bidding out process, as well as closeout crews to get our recon up to date after the harvest so that we know how long to wait to look at it again. So of those things, this position does basically 50% of what our office does for timber sale establishment. The part that's a little lower would be the marking, because we do pull me, Dane, the assistant administrator, as well as the forest technician and the park supervisor. Everybody in the department marks timber. It's a little lower percentage of completed work by that position, but half of all the other setup is that position. Whenever we have a project or a problem or an issue or something we got to tackle, or a body, the one item that we do that we pull away from constantly is timber sale establishment. It might be counterintuitive, but it's always there. But other issues that are hot fires that you can't avoid dealing with have to be dealt with. So it kind of cuts our own throat when we have to do that. Without this position, we would be, simply put, we would be establishing far less timber sale acreage for selling timber, making money.
And you're required to have a certain number of sales or, you know.
Oh, yes, I should say that by being certified, actually without certification, just by our 15-year plan and with forest certification, we're required to meet our allowable cut. So we have outside entities in the form of the DNR as well as forest certification requiring us to establish as close as we can to our yearly allowable cut. That acreage is calculated on the recon system through complex computations, but timber types and how often you can enter them and growth rate, all that goes. So yeah, we have to get this work done.
That's all in state law.
Order to stay compliant.
If you're not in compliance, then you lose the 50% for the salary that you get.
Yeah. Right. So this position isn't exactly, state statute required, but in essence, it is because the work he's doing is required by state statute under Chapter 2811, the County Forest Law.
Would it also be accurate to say that if you don't meet that quota, or so to speak, that the quality would deteriorate if you regularly didn't cut what you were allowed?
Yeah, that's accurate. Less forest management is going to lead to lower quality timber. And that can be rolled right into our issue with pay. Roy left for pay. Retaining grade A timber markers going to pay off in the long run. It's okay to believe, and I might agree, that some positions are just going to have a lot of turnover because they're more entry level. With marking timber, you're really cutting your own throat when you accept that, because a grade B or C, fresh out of college, not very well trained timber marker is doing harm that's gonna be you can't calculate it. You won't really see it, but it's gonna happen in the growth of the timber, and it's gonna affect us. If not today in our timber sale, it'll affect us in 20 years when we're in that stand again, or in 50 years when we're in that stand again, or in 10 years, depending on timber type again. So maintaining these high quality foresters is pretty important, in my opinion, for maximizing the most valuable growth potential of the forest.
And pretty forests make better tourism dollars too.
That's what it all boils down.
Yeah.
Dollars.
I move that we allow him to refill this.
We have a second.
Yeah, I'll second.
Are we done discussing?
Sorry.
Any more
I just have a
discussion?
question. I don't have an issue with filling this. The only thing, it almost seems to me like we're not representing this salary properly. It seems like we're almost, it just seems to me like, if we, like, for example, if we didn't have the sale that we anticipated, and the salary was not paid through the revenue of the timber, but rather through the levy, we're not being honest with public money, I don't think. That's,
We're not what, Tom?
we're not being honest with the public money. Where this is on here. I'm just wondering if we shouldn't, instead of it being timber sale revenue, if it shouldn't be county tax levy.
You can budget it however you want. I
That's-
don't really
yeah.
care.
Yeah,
Any revenue that the county brings in is a guess when you're budgeting for the next year. So I
yeah,
guess you could do that for every single penny we make anywhere.
I was gonna say, if a department charges a fee for its services, that's a revenue. So
Yep.
in essence, you're selling material that you produce, it's a revenue. So I don't know why you would wanna inflate the levy and then turn around and then bring in more from the general fund to offset it. It just, it's just a self-sustaining department. And I don't think we need to worry about not taking in enough revenue to cover the department's expenses. It's not taking in enough revenue to subsidize all the other departments.
We need to sell more lumber.
So, yeah,
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any other discussion?
I have another question. How did the last timber sale go? For the pieces that were offered up, were all of them taken? Was there a percentage that were not?
I don't have the exact information in front of me. We had, I have to guess, probably about 15 to 20 sales, and we are sitting on 4 that did not. Now, along with our new sales, so we have, I think, 19 sales that are open for bid on the 20th.
So there were 4.
Well over half of them sold. Yeah, four leftovers.
That are re-up for bid now.
too bad.
Yes.
Cause that was on a downward trend for a little bit, was it not? But it sounds like it's getting better.
I'm not sure that it's getting better. It may be leveling out. I wouldn't say it's getting better at this point.
Is that the normal number you kind of put up, Jared, for bid, or is it usually more, or don't you know?
Yep, it's pretty normal. It kind of depends on the sales. We have more larger sales, then there's less sales. If we have smaller sales, you need more of them to hit that acreage.
Okay.
But yeah, it's always, I would say, between 10 and 20 in the spring and another 10 and 20 in the fall,
The fact that we
as
don't
far
have
as quantity of sales.
the local mills closing down has probably affected it more than anything else. Right?
Yeah, the Wisconsin Rapids mill really hurt everybody in the state. You know, it used to be almost all of our pulp went there, and now it's getting scattered between Poquet, Minnesota, and the UP, Mosinee, LP Hayward, as well as LP Tomahawk and PCA Tomahawk. It's kind of just getting sprinkled everywhere, slowly but surely.
And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jared, but the word I hear occasionally is there's less and less people taking this timber. Is the reason I was asking some of the questions. I hear there's less people doing it. Like I said, feel free to correct me if I'm getting wrong information there. So that's where my concern's coming from a little bit. It's not to pick at your department, but I mean, if we get to the point where we can't, if there's just not people willing to buy timber, I understand you need to manage it yet, but if we're not gonna be able to market it, that's where my concern's coming in.
No, that's absolutely a fair concern. I don't know the numbers, but my anecdotal evidence, what I see and what I think is happening is, yeah, I think there's less loggers out there now than there was 8 years ago for sure. But we do have some real strong bidders yet at this point.
I think there's some efforts out there at the state level, at least to try to encourage new forest products industries to either expand or locate here. It might be that the county needs to get involved in that effort. I don't know exactly who's managing that effort, but I know that I've seen some information at the Industrial Development Corporation has been interested in that effort, and maybe we should look into that and see if the county should get involved in it as well.
Well, that's correct. There are like the forest products people in the DNR as well as Wisconsin County Forest Association. That those people are definitely working to bring industry into the state. It's so far it's been a pretty fruitless work. I don't know. It's hard to start a new mill, but and I think well there has been some discussions I believe probably with Ashley maybe in regards to that as well as that I've had with local legislators and stuff. And Mr. Summerfeld in particular, the new guy down in Madison.
The county actually has,
People trying, but it's been tough.
I say the county actually has some infrastructure that would make our county area attractive to new forest products industries. The rail yard out in Tony is a big one, a few other things. So, it is something
that word is out there.
we should be marketing ourselves for that.
I would agree.
Anybody else? Second, right?
We do.
Favor say aye.
Aye.
Carries. Thank you, Jared.
Thank you guys. I'm sorry I couldn't be there, but
No, that's all right.
for the help.
Good information.
Have a good day.
You're up.
Okay, so Chair Mike had asked that I give a quick update to the Personnel Committee on where the county stands with the ad hoc roles and responsibilities committee. So the committee was created by board resolution, if you guys will remember, a few months ago, and the membership is set by the board chair. So our current members are District 13, who is serving as the chair, District 3 serving as the vice chair, District 7, 9, and 12. So I'll briefly go through what has happened at the 3 meetings of the ad hoc committee so far. The first meeting was on February 17th. So the committee was introduced to attorney Andy Phillips, who I think you guys have all been exposed to, and Sarah from the Wisconsin Counties Association. They sent homework to the committee before the meeting, which included the list of questions you see on the left-hand side of the screen. And then each member answered the questions, and a summary of their responses is on the right-hand side of the screen. So the 4 questions were, tell me all of the reasons why the board is discussing the roles of the administrative coordinator. What is working well in Rusk County? What is not working well in Rusk County? And what is the role of the board's committees? So this is a brief summary of the answers given. Each board member spoke for quite some time and gave really good answers, but kind of the main points that came from this were roles and responsibilities are not clear. There is no ability for anyone to make daily operational decisions. We have a lot of really good employees at Rusk County. There's a lot of our citizenry who want to see the county succeed. The board must get involved in day-to-day decisions because the AC job description isn't clear as to what that position is doing in day-to-day decisions. There's a general lack of trust. The current committee structure is inefficient. Our departments are siloed. There's blame placing and micromanaging, and too much time is wasted in long and unproductive committee meetings. So what did we do with that information? The action item that came out of the meeting was that the committee asked the Wisconsin counties to send them job descriptions for administrative coordinators and administrators around the state, and then the committee would review them at their next meeting. They met again on March 17th, and again, Andy and Sarah gave the committee homework with questions, which are on the left-hand side, and responses on the right-hand side. So of all of the job descriptions that were given to the committee, Andy and Sarah wanted answers to the following. Is there language in these descriptions that is inconsistent with the responses that you guys gave last meeting? Are there functions in these job descriptions that cause you concern? Are there functions in these job descriptions that would benefit Rusk County if provided by an administrator or an administrative coordinator? And what are 5 to 10 functions from these job descriptions that you would include in a job description for the position of admin or admin coordinator for Rusk County? So again, a lot of answers were given, but the main kind of themes that came out were who currently has and who should have fiscal oversight? Do other counties have finance directors and human resource managers? Who in other counties appoint members to committees, boards, and commissions? Should the position that the county is considering, our county is considering, ensure a comp plan, strategic plan, and capital improvement plan are completed? And what would a change in the current AC position do to the county's organizational structure? So after a lot of robust discussion, what was decided? The direction at the end of this meeting was that Wisconsin counties would take what they learned from the February and March meetings and formulate a draft job description for the committee to review. The most prominent question was, does this look like more of an administrator or an administrative coordinator? So at the last meeting of the ad hoc on April 21st, the Wisconsin counties submitted a Vernon County Administrative Coordinator job description based off of the feedback they received. The committee did seem to have consensus that this was an administrative coordinator position versus an administrator position. They did ask the Wisconsin counties to provide more clarification surrounding budget and fiscal responsibilities, and they wanted to see a bullet point specifically in the job description regarding capital improvement and strategic planning. And finally, the committee did discuss where should this position report to during a possible transition to an executive committee. And the consensus by the end of that meeting seemed to be that the Committee on Committees could serve that purpose, while the ad hoc continued to talk about committee structure in Rusk County. So what are the next steps? The Wisconsin Counties is currently putting together a presentation of the progress that has been made by the committee and what their recommendation to the full board is regarding changes to the administrative coordinator job description. The committee will meet once more on May 19th, which is a week from this coming Monday, to review the presentation and the draft job description before bringing a recommendation to the full board, which tentatively right now is looking like June. The committee then discussed that they would like to post for the position if and when the board approves that updated job description. So did you guys have any questions? And we have 2 members of that committee here, actually, if they wanted to jump in.
So good job. I would just like to add, we spent a lot of time talking about the new position or the position being responsible for all the department heads as well, so that the department heads would not necessarily get their job performance done by the committee structure, but there would be one person in charge of the whole county and to try to address the issue with the siloing, and one person as part of the strategic plan and all of that, that will hopefully be able to solve problems countywide, repeat problems that occur in multiple departments. So I feel like that, I mean, the big things were having accountability and a chain of command that's consistent all the way across the county. And then also you have more clarity on so that there is a person to go to specifically.
More clarity on what, the budget issues?
Yeah, finance issues, right? And Jim was only at one, right?
I was only one. I knew, but I was still trying to absorb. I was doing a lot of absorbing the last meeting.
John was at the first meeting,
Right.
and then the second meeting, there were only the 4 of us, and then Jim was at the last meeting.
Well, it looks interesting. Are.
Just as a refresher too, the county administrator, if you go that way, instead of having the administrative coordinator where we define through the job description what it is, the county administrator position is delineated in statute what the responsibilities are. So I think to the committee, that seems like kind of a bigger leap than to pick the things that we think are not working in our county and fix them through the administrative coordinator job description, then go all the way to the county administrator where it's statutorily defined how it's going to work. The other thing is Andy had pointed out that there was one committee or county, I forget which one it was, that did do that. They went to the county administrator role and then ended up not liking the way that worked and backtracked back down. So it seems like a more natural progression to figure out what, again, we feel like is not working and fixing that in the job description, then going all the way, taking the step of becoming a county administrator county.
Here's what she said. A little bit I was there.
But it kind of sounded like that the committee is leaning towards an AC. But with added responsibilities.
Yes. Yes. And part of that too is as we come up with a new description was to get a new wage scale, right, as well.
That wouldn't be part of roles and responsibilities, I don't think.
No, you were gonna, once the position was rewritten, you were gonna find out what. would be-
Oh, if you guys want to resubmit it to Carlson Depp.
Yes, yeah, to find out what would be a more appropriate salary or an appropriate salary
Yeah.
for the new responsibility.
And then once all of that is determined, then it will go open for people to bid on the job.
So that is still being discussed. I think the committee, I personally, I can't speak for anybody else, but I was surprised when Andy said that you could just roll an incumbent into a newly defined job with a different pay scale. So I think that's something that I personally would like to get more information on.
Be determined.
Yeah,
A really bad decision. Do that.
so,
A repost for the position.
That's a yes.
We'll have a lot of legal
it's right. But if it's,
if we post for the position.
so if you completely
Post.
change a
If we
job,
post for the position, because it's the same role and the duty, if you look, I don't know if anybody's compared the current job description to like what we're currently doing and the current qualifications. It doesn't significantly change that much. Plus, are you guys bypassing the 2/3 removal then?
well, so I personally, I mean, we can talk to Phil about getting that on the agenda, but that is something that, yeah, I did not understand and do not have clarity on. Like, so,
I talked to our corp counsel about it.
You mentioned that in your presentation, that it possibly.
yeah,
Yes, because that was what was discussed by the committee. The consensus seemed to be that they wanted to post for it. And Andy Phillips had kind of said like, well, it's
You don't-
really up to you guys.
don't
what you
have to.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't know, or I don't understand how much of when it's the same job or a different job, if you're rewriting the job description.
There's a lot of underlying stuff getting to what she said, but I don't want
So
to
we.
into that
Clarity.
in this venue, but it's that would be ill-advised.
So we'll definitely need to talk about that more with so if it was a county administrator, again, this probably isn't, I don't know the right form to talk about it, but if we did switch to a county administrator, then does that have to be reposted or not?
Again, it's up to the body, but if you look at state statute, what are the qualifications for a county administrator according to state statute? It's really as the body sees fit. The body will appoint someone who has the proper qualifications and how do you as the body define that?
And the problem is you can't circumvent the 2/3 removal process. That is a state statute.
Okay. So I feel like we need more information.
Yeah.
On this. It is, we have not talked about any of that in that degree.
Yeah, I think the
Yeah.
cart's getting way ahead of the horse here, so to speak.
Yeah, we're still,
Well, it is and it isn't because that is what.
Yeah, but you're making some allegations in here that the committee hasn't settled on yet. And you're opening up a can, honestly, right now that I haven't heard the committee make a motion that they're going to repost the position.
I don't think we've made motions on anything, but
Right.
committees still made the consent. I mean, all of you guys said yes to post it, so that's why I went forward to look at what our legalities would be of a county if we did that.
And I think that my feeling from the one meeting I was involved in, that's why Andy Phillips is there. So yes, that question should be addressed, but from the one meeting I was in, I mean, I don't think this is done yet. And it was just something that was brought up as a question in general.
Anybody got any more questions?
Did the committee at all make any or look into how, if you're basically going to make some structural changes and maybe almost an organizational chart type of structural changes, and whether that would include changing the job descriptions of some of, or maybe all of our department heads, not only in terms of who they answer to, but also some other key positions such as finance director and a few other department heads that their job description would definitely, I think, have to be changed. That discussed at all?
Yes, so in the slide where I said the committee was asking, do other county HR directors and finance directors? So yes, I think, was it you or Kurtz may have brought that up. So if we are having the AC position oversee all of the department heads, then who's presenting the budget to the board, or who has final say on policy interpretation and things like that? And all of those things can be defined through job description. Yes, you're correct. I think all of our department head job descriptions would need to be then updated if you do move forward with this.
Else? Thank you. Interesting.
Sure. Okay, so this is the first month of the budget report forms coming to committees. I think some of you have probably seen these so far. We're looking good on our administrative budget. There are just a couple things I wanted to bring to your guys' attention. The first is on our contracted services line. So we went through budget cuts last fall, obviously, and we had that very right on. We did calculations and everything to get as close as we could on our contracted services line. Well, unfortunately, something happened. We had unexpected expenses for not only an IHO, an independent hearing officer, but also that person wanted a court reporter there as well. So it was $3,800. The IHO wanted the county to be on the hook for that full bill, but we have invoiced the for their half. If we don't get that, we will be even more over budget. So that's one thing I wanted to bring to you guys, because that line will be over. What Ashley and I are looking at right now is lowering our advertising costs to kind of balance that out. So the 216 line will be over, but the advertising line should be hopefully under by quite a bit. The other line of concern that we're monitoring right now, because we aren't over, because our legal fees have been pretty good so far, is the labor negotiations. So the 212 line, the sheriff's department, obviously you guys are personnel, that is taking a lot longer to negotiate with the patrol.
It's going to keep going.
Yes, that is correct. And we'll talk more about that, Ashley, when she goes into closed session with you guys about why we're anticipating that line is going to be over due to negotiations. Other than that, all of our lines are on track and the budget's looking good so far.
We get the $12.
I fulfilled an open records request.
Well, do more of that. Oh, wait, no, that's a problem. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I do need a motion, sorry, to forward to finance.
A motion for finance, the budget report.
We'll move.
I'll second.
Any more discussion? And how's this, I do have a question. How are people doing with this? I know in one of your comments, it was, we haven't been diligent in budgetary matters in the past.
I would say as a county, we have not. So our financial procedures manual, Jim can attest to this, is long and it's involved. And the further you dig into it, the more you realize that a lot of some of the issues that have bubbled up in the last couple of years, they're addressed in our financial procedures manual. And for whatever reason, we just haven't necessarily been diligent in making sure that we're following all of those things. As far as departments, they've been really good at getting their forms in. A couple of departments, unfortunately, the timing didn't really line up, so they'll be full force here in June. But I have already heard from some departments that this is pretty laborious or laborious, however you say that word.
Laborious is good.
So we might have to see how it goes for a couple of months and then
To
maybe
motivate them.
we talk to the board again to just do status updates, see how it's going for everybody.
Okay. Anybody else? We have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. You don't need this back, do you?
Meyer gets it.
You need.
Putting it on a little pile.
I guess I'm a little bit confused here. We're asking the individual departments to review their budget, fill out some kind of information.
Yeah, you passed this back in January. Sorry, go ahead.
Like an update.
Yeah,
Just to let us know where.
It's like a status.
That's it?
It's like a
Just
status.
to let the committees, the oversight committees know where they're.
Yeah, I just wondered, there was a time when the finance director basically created those documents. I remember, like Health and Human Services Board, when I was on the Health and Human Services Board, we got an update every month of where we were and projections. You know, say, okay, if we keep spending on this line item the way we are right now, we're gonna be behind or ahead or whatever. And then, but that was mostly reports that were created by the finance director, I presume by their software. So I'm wondering why the department heads would have to,
did it look like this?
um,
So finance is still creating this, but the problem is that 80% of our departments weren't bringing this to their oversight.
absolutely, yeah.
Right, so then what we did was, so instead of you guys having to go line by line by line by line and getting confused and bogged down in details, we're putting the onus on the department head like I just did, telling you guys, I'm coming to you, telling you I'm gonna overspend on this line right here, and here's why, and here's how I'm gonna try to rectify it. If that makes sense, because the finance director does put,
So the department head is analyzing
yes, because I
this information.
don't think the finance director should tell me what my projections are for my budget, if that makes sense, because the finance director isn't spending my money.
The department heads, that's their responsibility.
They're auditing spent money.
Exactly.
They're monitoring their own expenditures.
If I remember right when it came up kind of in finance too, it was, we were getting kind of sideswiped with some oddball stuff, and we felt that the committees should take a little more ownership and be more involved, because some of this, I guess my mindset was committees wasn't brought to their attention. And then come to finance, we'd have to send it back to committee and bring it to their attention. So we were hoping that maybe committees would, or at least that was my mindset behind it, was would see it before we had to address it.
So for instance, Baker Tilly right now is trying to close out our 2024 books with Tanya. Okay, we have budgets that are going to need to be amended. I would curious if some of the people who sit on those committees were aware that the budgets that they oversee are more than 10% in excess of their expenditures. And if the committees aren't aware, if it comes as a total surprise at the county board on that resolution, like I oversee basket weaving and they overspent by $28,000. I would say that's a communication issue that we have in the county because the basket weaving committee should have probably, that shouldn't be a surprise to them that 2024 ended for that department in the red.
Well, the committee shouldn't have to ask.
Mm.
I mean, we shouldn't have to go, every committee should not have to go digging through the line items in each department to see where they stand. I mean, that's the department managers heads up to the oversight committee. Hey, we have an ups. Okay, I get that happen, you know, stuff happens. But what are you suggesting to remediate that problem? Just gonna wait till the end of the year and say, I need more money, mom and dad.
The reality is that information wasn't being given because nobody was asking for it.
Yeah, so chicken and the egg, right?
So the onus really goes back on the committee. If the committee isn't asking for that information, they shouldn't be blaming the person for not giving it to them. In my opinion, we should, I mean,
Well,
it would appear as though committees don't care whether they're overspending or not, because somehow at the end of the year, somebody's gonna bring in the magic wand and wave it over it, and we're going to, I mean, you'll have a list of amendments to the
Or
budget.
in this case, what,
Contingency and blah, blah, blah. You know, so a lot of it has been, you know, sort of a mutual agreement to not
to not talk about it.
be responsible to each other.
or is it, I thought maybe it was just due to the fact we've got a lot of new people on the board that just may not know.
I'm not gonna ask for it, and
They don't know.
I don't
to
want
ask
you
for
to,
it, though.
I don't want you to tell me either.
But I think some don't know to ask, you know, and what to expect.
Oh, God.
But now it should be kind of cut and dried that no matter who's on that committee, they should be seeing some type of report.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, some counties actually the board gets a finance report. You know, balance sheet and the whole caboodle every month.
Well, I used to have to do a balance sheet every month in previous lifetimes, but it was only, and this is where we maybe will get to, it was only, yeah, and you said 10%. But I had a number that if I exceeded that number, I had to report up the chain. And I also had to have a reason why. And then I also had to have how I was going to fix that. You couldn't just go and ask, and this is in the private sector where we could raise the price of a slice of bread. And we can't do that here. So it's even more important to not only to identify the shortfall or the overspending, but what are you going to do about it? I mean, everybody knows it.
I think we're gonna put a tariff in Barron County.
Well, we already got a tariff on Canada and we're going to sell more lumber. So,
But every time we
wheel tax.
every time we give an employee to Barron County, we're gonna charge him a tariff.
We are 145%.
Yeah.
I don't like elections I went through and I thought, I tried so hard. I even, this sounds terrible, but I even put extra on there. Still went over. I don't know who's gonna run, how many referendums there's gonna be. I don't know what the cost is to create that ballot. I don't. So how do I anticipate that?
Well, you can't, on some of that, you cannot.
It was 12,000 over.
Yeah. So,
50.
yeah.
Well, I think when you overspend the budget, there are extenuating circumstances but then there are some overages that are due to negligence or bad decision making, and that's where we need to.
Right.
The price of eggs goes up. And
We got to get more chickens.
Chickens, yeah.
Human resources.
Okay, so my report is up first. So April, we had 3-term highway worker, a land conservation administrative assistant, and a forester. In April, we had 2 hires, a records management specialist and circuit court judge 1. We have, again, high numbers, 15 total positions not yet filled. Finance director, highway worker, patrol deputy, 3 jailer dispatchers, chief deputy, social worker, full-time EMT, elder benefit specialist, forester, breastfeeding peer counselor, and the land conservation administrative assistant, along with 2 that are not posted, which is operations manager and highway commissioner. So those would be,
Some of those we're interviewing for.
yep. Some of them, we have upcoming interviews for, correct. Any questions on that? I think at this month's highway committee, we're going to be talking more about the operations manager and the highway commissioner and when we're gonna post that or what our kind of plan is for those 2 positions. So. Okay.
Moving right along.
So next up is the Russ County Personnel Handbook, Chapter 2. So our current Chapter 2 is employment categories and performance evaluations, changing that over to employment categories and compensation policy. Hopefully you guys had a chance to look at this, but to kind of recap. So right now, Russ County currently does not have a compensation policy or plan in place, nor do we have any detailed, clear language that spells out how we handle compensation for hires, for promotions, demotions, and similar employment actions. So changes to this chapter of the handbook will focus on establishing consistency in these areas. So over the past year, we have experienced several cases where decisions have been made inconsistently. So we've had promotions where pay increases have ranged anywhere from 5% to 21%, simply because we had no structure or guidelines to follow. So these decisions were then forced to be made on a case-by-case basis with different reasoning applied in each situation, all because, again, we didn't have that set policy to follow. So these discrepancies have created understandable frustrations from different employees, department heads, even different board members as well. So the draft language you see in front of you is designed to fix that by giving us clear, transparent guidelines. So one of the main responsibilities of HR is to create and present policies that ensure consistency and help reduce our risk. The board, though, ultimately retains that full authority and power over what the policy should say and what it should look like. So right now, we do not have anything that explains what step a new employee should start at, when it is appropriate to start someone at a higher step, and what happens during promotions, demotions, or reclassifications. So without a policy, decisions are then inconsistent. So developing a policy would remove that guesswork and protect both the employee and the county from arbitrary decisions or perceived favoritism. So in the proposed language, it outlines clear standards for how new hires are placed on the wage scale, how we apply step and structure adjustments if approved by the board, what guidelines to follow for promotions, demotions, and transfers, and how we manage temporary appointments, and lastly, how we would handle a reclassification or somebody's job change. So these policy changes introduce structure while still allowing exceptions when appropriate and reviewed by the appropriate committees. It gives department heads and oversight committees something concrete to follow, and it gives HR a consistent way to apply decisions, and then the board a fair and sound basis for final approvals. So without standards, the decisions are left to past practices or to individual judgment, which is exactly what has caused a lot of the problems that we've had. So I'm happy to walk through any of the specific language if you guys have questions or anything else that you want me to address or answer.
Under, section 4, A2. The market conditions demand a higher wage, or higher starting wage. Shouldn't our wage scale drive that wage? I mean, do they?
Yeah, it should, but in cases too, like where I could see this happening is you know, we have somebody say that has a great level of experience and a skill set immediately usable, and that position is really hard for us to fill, that we're not, you know, we're not finding those applicants. We're looking at the pay, and maybe, you know, sometimes even if we're following our wage scale, we're still gonna have certain positions that just with the market, they're gonna move faster than other positions. So if we're seeing that, we maybe haven't changed it on our wage scale, but they still need to meet all three of these points. So it can't just be like, oh, the market is higher, because then we'd be essentially doing that to every new hire, right? And trying to hire them higher because market would be higher, but they'd still have to have that experience, that skill set. And then also the current departmental employee placement. So looking at where other employees are placed on this scale, so we're not jumping them either, because we don't want to cause that concern either.
Seems like we keep gravitating towards something more concrete and definable. But we always have the loophole clause that somewhere along the line, that, you know, there's an extenuating circumstance, so, you know, market conditions or whatever, and the wise and prudent department head sees that in capital letters boldly, and so that's where they go every time. And so we end up either disappointing them, or we end up making those exceptions that
It's in trouble.
circle around and come back and get us into the same discussion that we keep having. I don't know how to resolve that, but
I don't think you can. We have that happen 4 or 5 times a year at the school, where somebody comes and says, I can go to Bruce and make $6,000 more. I say, well, have a nice time at Bruce. And we're gonna have to deal with specifically the market conditions to demand a higher starting wage one of these days in our tech ed, because you can't find a tech ed teacher anymore. It's just, they're so hard to find, and they command so money. And, you know, we just raised our starting wage to 42K, which is low. I mean, it just is, but that's what we can afford. But several years ago, we had to get creative with our tech ed department and figure out a way to put more money in there. And we heard about it. I mean, everybody got beat up.
wasn't that problem of calling it tech ed instead of shop?
Yeah. Could have been.
Yeah.
It could have been.
Oh, wow, tech ed.
Well, it was, now it's STEM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
But yeah, there's always gonna be that one job that you have to have, and that everybody has to have, and people can go out and start a bidding war. And I don't, unless you're the one organization that can pay everybody 5,000 more than anybody is paying, it's like sheriff's going to bear. Can't compete.
And in this case, like what is in here would help to at least have something a little more strict than what we currently have. Like right now, we don't have anything besides like the department.
I like
Just go
this.
to the committee member and can do that. So at least in this case, a few more people have to be agreeable before even going to the committee to, you know, to try to protect some of those inconsistencies. And I'm all open for ideas on changing this. I took this from a couple other counties that have compensation plans, and they worked with third-party companies to come up with their compensation plan too. I didn't just. Oh,
Yeah, there's no silver bullet. I like it though.
I think Ashley has tried to via resolutions to solve some of these problems. that we have.
Yes.
And or decided to kick them down the road indefinitely. So unless, you know, we can go with some of her recommendations, I don't see this problem getting corrected anytime soon.
What'd you say, Tom?
And that being said, I'm leaving. Thanks, Steve. If it comes to it, I don't even know if I can or not, but I would vote yes for the union.
We have a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve it. You can second it before you leave.
I'll second it.
Any more discussion?
What are we doing here?
We're approving the changes, to the handbook, chapter 2, employment categories and performance
This one
evaluation.
right here, we're putting, you said union thing.
I said that if it came to it, I don't even know if I can be absent, but I would vote to approve the union proposal.
Oh,
You said union
He
proposal.
said
I
union.
thought you said this.
Said this.
I go for this as well.
Okay, thank you. I didn't catch that
If
one.
it came, I
Vital word.
don't know, not being here, if that counts.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Quorum is in that, but
Yeah.
if it came to. I
Good to know. Thank you.
would vote to pass that.
Okay, so now we have a motion and a second on
Changes to the person.
approve changes to the Russ County Personnel Handbook, chapter 2, employment categories and performance evaluations.
I,
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you.
My vote's no on that because I want more discussion on this, but so be it. I'll have my chance at county board, I guess. I wanted to absorb this some more.
Okay,
I would appreciate, I think you prepare a, presentation and a rationale, but that would be helpful to have to read ahead of time rather
Done that with board.
than just to hear it.
Cause I was a little confused on control point. Like on 4A, but I can ask that stuff later, what you meant by control point.
And we'll hear all about that in a little bit.
Okay.
is that like midpoint?
What?
Is that like midpoint?
Yeah, that would be what we set as our market rate.
Yeah.
Or possibly mute point.
Or what, viewpoint? It's not a viewpoint, it's a.
Could be mute.
It's kind of like needlepoint.
Like no,
That's a lot harder.
Yeah, right, yeah. Well,
Lynn did needle.
It's more
But it's
pointed.
more pointed,
Yes, more point.
to the point, though. We're having a very pointed discussion. Sometimes I'm not sure what even the point is.
Now what do we do?
Okay, so the next is the status update on the wage grid in Russ County. So we have made a presentation for you, Ashley and I have. Okay, so first off, want to talk about introduction, so why this matters. So our current wage scale at Russ County has remained unchanged since implementation. So our wage scale was implemented in March of 2023 based on information that was gathered in 2022. So that means since the information was gathered in 2022, it would have been data that was from 2021, like actual wage data from 2021, and then projected increased data from 2022. So market wages have continued to rise, making our pay less competitive. And Russ County's scale has remained stagnant. So today we're going to highlight how our current structure compares to today's market, the risks of inaction, and what options we have going forward. So we recently took 62 of our positions that we have within Russ County and evaluated them against our surrounding counties. And I know there's a lot of talk about like our surrounding counties versus what we can afford, but for the fact of where we're losing people to is surrounding counties, we did look at 7 counties. So Rusk, Barron, Chippewa, Price, Sawyer, Taylor, and Washburn counties. And we looked at the wage scales of these positions. So a lot of times when you come in here, department heads come forward to these meetings and they say, the chief deputy in this county is making this, or the forester in this county is making this. They're looking at actual wages, like what that person is actually making. For this comparison, I'm looking at their wage scale. So what our minimum is compared to what their minimum, what our control point is compared to their control point, and what our max wage is compared to their max wage. So first up is looking at our minimum wage. We looked at this because this is our typical wage that we start employees at. These wages would be essential for impacting our recruitment. So when looking at the average minimum wage versus Rusk counties, and with that average, Rusk County is factored into that. We have 27 positions that are over 10% behind. The highest position being almost 21% behind. 20 of our positions are between 5 and 10% behind. 10 positions between 0 and 5, and 5 of our positions are above that average starting minimum wage in comparison with those 7 counties. So next up will be a graph. So that's that graph that shows the green line is what Rusk County's minimum is, and the orange line is what our surrounding counties, including Rusk County in that, what their average minimum wage is.
That's the blended. Orange is a blended average.
Yeah, with Rusk's wage in there too. Yep. So next up, we looked at the control point. So the control point essentially represents the market rate for that job. This would be your goal rate for someone fully competent in that role. So paying employees below that would suggest that we're underpaying them compared to the market, especially for those that are experienced or long tenured. So this rate would be crucial for retention. The first rate is kind of like recruitment. This is retention. And when employees remain stuck well below that rate, they would feel undervalued and underpaid. So when looking at the average control point, which on our scale is step 11, Rusk County has 34 positions that fall over 10% behind. The highest position is behind by over 22%. 16 positions are between 5 and 10%, 9 positions between 0 and 5, and then 3 positions are above the average starting control point wage. And then there's that graph now with, again, the green being Rusk County's control point average, and then the other counties' control point average.
Can I just ask a quick question? I might have missed. How did you pick the 62 positions?
I tried doing every single position we had, but some counties didn't have didn't have enough comparable positions where it's like we might have had this title and I couldn't exactly determine on their scale what that would be, because I tried to. It's also a little hard because I have to be mindful of like, okay, so if you were to go and look, it might not be their exact title compared to ours, but I know like this position here does this, and this, and I know at some other county, they call it this name. So some positions I just wasn't able to have enough data to do it. So I tried doing every, but 62 is where I landed with enough other counties. I think my cutoff was I had to have like at least 3 other counties that had the comparable position to include them in my homegrown study. Yep. So then lastly is the maximum step, which on our scale is step 21. So this maximum pay is what staff would be working towards, the highest they could get. This would be the rate that rewards longevity. So a high level of expertise and proficiency in their role. It would keep long-term high performing employees in their roles, and it would discourage them from turnover late in their careers. So when looking at that, we have 44 positions that are over 10% behind, with the highest position being over 27% behind. 10 positions are behind 5 to 10%, 7 behind 0 to 5, and 1 position is above the average starting maximum wage. So there's that. So as you can see in this slide and the previous 2 slides, a majority of our positions are underpaid as it relates to the average. However, as the position grade increases, the further we fall behind on wages. So understanding our current structure, Rusk County's wage scale was set based on the 25th to 50th percentile market rate blended rate of the expected 2022 market. There are currently 21 steps on our wage scale, with step 11 being our control point. So this represents that blended rate, meaning it was already below the true market median of 50%. If you were to look at like where is the true 25th percentile market rate on our scale, that would be step 7, meaning 75% of employers in the market pay more than that. And that was again back in 2022. The true market median, so what 50% would be our steps 15 to 16 on our wage scale. So this is far from where we are at for most employees. In fact, only 12 of our employees, or 9% of our employees, are currently at this rate, this median point rate from 3 years ago. So where we stood at implementation, even in 2022, we were positioned below the full market median because of how we implemented our scale, which I understand we had a lot of significant barriers on implementation. which made it difficult to attract and retain top talent. So when a new hire does start, typically, and I would say, I bet if I had to go back and do an actual calculation, it's probably about at least 95% of our staff are starting at that step one of our wage scale, which is approximately 17% below market median in 2022. So where we're at now, this graph shows our current number of employees and what steps they are placed on as of today. So as of today, we had 133 employees on our wage scale. The green bars all the way on the left, that signifies step 11 and higher. So this would be 31 of our employees. So 23% of our employees are being paid a blended market rate or higher based on what the market was 3 years ago. And then in yellow on the bottom, those are our employees that are placed between 1 and 5. That would be 58 of our employees, or 51% are step 5 or lower. So just a reminder that step 5 is not even that 25th percentile market rate from 3 years ago. So let's talk a little bit about the types of increases a little more. So there are 2 key components of a wage scale system. There's COLAs, which are cost of living adjustments, and there's step increases. So COLA adjustments increases the entire wage scale to keep up with inflation and market changes. So it would adjust the range of pay for each position. This helps to keep the pay scale aligned with external job markets and your rising cost of living. It also ensures the county can keep remaining competitive and retaining talent, and it avoids market-driven compression and pay equity issues that occur when new hires would be brought in at the same or higher salaries than your long-term employees. Now, step increases are internal adjustments that move an employee within their assigned pay grade. So this recognizes internal growth and career progression, helping employees to progress through that pay range over time, and also encourages retention and loyalty by showing that continued service leads to higher earnings. These are not interchangeable. They are both necessary and serve different purposes. Actually, if you want to do one more. Yep. So one without the other leads to imbalance and dissatisfaction. Say if we were only to give cost of living adjustments, so only gave COLA raises, our longtime employees would not see any recognition for experience in staying at Rusk County. And then on the other hand, if we only gave step increases, we're going to fall behind the market and risk higher turnover that way. So both should be reviewed and applied annually, ensuring a fair, transparent, and sustainable compensation system. So what has the market done since 2022? A majority of other employers have increased their scales to stay competitive. Our wage scale has been essentially frozen since 2022, meaning it had not reflected any market changes over those past 3 years. Our control point of step 11 is likely now well below that 25th percentile. So Cottingham and Butler, that is Hu Carlson Detman, they've changed their name over to Cottingham Butler. They send out a compensation study annually. I did some deep dive research into this, and in looking at this study for the public sector only and for the northern and western regions, Rusk County is right on that northern region line. So I looked at both northern and western. There are a few important things to note. So payroll budgets increased 11.5% in the last 3 years. This would be equivalent to like what your step increases are. So in that northern and western regions in Wisconsin, public sector averaged an 11.56% increase. So as for Rusk County, when we implemented the wage study, employees did see an average of about a 9% increase. However, this just brought most employees up to step 1 of that scale. So even with that 9% average increase employees saw, only 5% of our employees were actually placed at that blended market rate of step 11 or higher. 20% of our employees were placed at step 7 through 10, which would be about a 25th to 50th percentile blend. And then 75% of our employees were placed below the 25th percent market rate, so steps 1 to 6. Since implementing the wage scale, our employees have seen an average wage increase of 3 steps or 3.75%. So 1.25% or 1 step was given January 1st of 2024. And then in July of 2024, a two-step average was given. So if you guys remember, the board chose to do a one-time longevity-based increase where employees ranged from a one-step increase to a five-step increase, depending on your years of service. This did help our compression at the bottom of the scale. Because like I just talked about, we could not, when we implemented the wage study, we couldn't put people on the scale where they truly, for lack of a better word, deserve to be, because we just couldn't afford it. We didn't have the money to do that. So a lot of our people were at that beginning of the scale. By doing that one-time longevity increase in July, we did spread those people out. So our longer term employees are at least not, directly at the bottom because of that increase. Next up would be our structure increases. So if we look at structure or COLA increases in our region in the public sector, although raises are starting to finally level out more, there was some substantial increases that occurred over the past few years after COVID. Higher increases were and still are being seen among public sector compared to private. So that was really interesting data that public sector is seeing higher increases than private right now. In the last 3 years, wage structures in the public sector in northern and western Wisconsin increased by 10.8%. And we have not moved our scale at all since we implemented that. So ours would be 0. So why does all of this matter? We implemented a new wage structure and then we didn't maintain it for various reasons. So that would be like buying a brand new car and thinking you never need to change the oil or rotate the tires because it's new. The vehicle, like the wage structure implementation, was expensive, but maintenance is still required. So ignoring structure adjustments is like skipping the oil changes. If we skip it, performance suffers and you eventually are going to face more costly repairs. Implementing COLA structure adjustments keeps the whole system healthy and responsive to the conditions. Step increases are like putting gas in the tank. They keep it moving. The wage study gave us a solid foundation, but staying competitive is not just a one-time event. It is an ongoing process that we continually have to evaluate. Without having annual structure adjustments, that investment quickly loses value and we're going to be back in the same position we were before or worse. So we need to focus on fixing the systemic problem, which is the fact that our wage grid has fallen behind due to not maintaining it. Fixing positions one at a time is like replacing just one tire on a car with 4 bald ones. It does not solve the underlying problem. Piecemeal fixes to one position here and there only increase inconsistency, frustration, and legal risk. So what are the risks of falling behind? There's 4 main risks I want to mention. One of them is hiring. Candidates are choosing competitors with better pay. Number 2, retention. Existing employees may leave for higher wages elsewhere. Number 3, market competitiveness. Our positioning has deteriorated significantly on where we stand in the labor market. And number 4, morale and productivity. Wage dissatisfaction can reduce engagement and performance. So we have fully recognized that compensation alone is not going to solve all of our recruitment and retention challenges. There's workplace culture, management, job flexibility, career development. Those are all important pieces of this puzzle. However, compensation is consistently one of the top reasons employees leave, both locally and nationally. When pay is not competitive, it does become a major barrier to attracting and retaining talent, no matter how strong our other aspects of employment are. So without having that market-aligned pay, our other retention efforts lose effectiveness. So investing in fair market-aligned compensation is a foundational step that supports all other efforts. Wages will not solve everything, but without addressing them, we risk solving nothing. So in conclusion, we started behind the market median in 2022. Now we are significantly less competitive. Without regular updates, we lose talent, fall further behind, and risk long-term damage. And we must treat compensation as an ongoing process, not a one-time event. So what are some things we can do? We can conduct a market wage study to update our benchmarks. We can adjust the control point to align more with that 50th percentile of current market rates. We can implement annual structure reviews to stay current. And we can introduce retention-focused strategies, including possible step adjustments to wages. One of the main things to do all that is we could partner with Cottingham and Butler, formerly Carlson Detman, for a compensation market update. So the objective they have would be to assist us in remeasuring our target market and assessing the competitiveness of our current pay structure. So they would ensure our comp system and practices continue to support our goals and ability to recruit and to retain talent. Their deliverables that they would have for this project would be measuring the labor market using benchmark jobs and similar data sources that they already previously measured. Review marketing positioning and provide alternatives for addressing any competitive challenges, including but not limited to an option for a revised pay plan structure based upon market assessments. And they could provide costing alternatives for implementation of an updated structure. This project they are estimating would take 60 to 90 days, and it's would cost just shy of $23,000 to do the project, and any additional work outside of the scope and associated project or travel expenses would be invoiced separately. But the big question, right, is how are we funding this? I'm gonna pass that over to Ashley to talk about that.
Okay, so today I want to speak directly to the question of how we can responsibly fund staff raises given our current fiscal constraints. One of our primary limitations here in county government is the state levy limit law, which for reference is Wisconsin Stat 66.0602. This restricts counties from increasing the property tax levy beyond the growth and net new construction, which has averaged 0.8% in Rusk County over the last 5 years. The average increase in our allowable levy in Rusk County over that same 5-year time period was $316,588 to operate the entire county. And in fact, in 2022, Rusk County was one of 8 counties statewide that saw a decrease in the levy. So this gives you a sense of how constrained our revenue growth has been and will continue to be. Operating costs, inflation, and CPI continue to rise at a much higher rate than our levy. So why are we talking about finances at the Personnel Committee? That's a great question. I know you're all thinking. 44% of the county's budgeted expenditures are wages and benefits. As the committee charged with overseeing employee compensation, the decisions made here do have a large impact on the county's overall fiscal condition. Last fall, the Personnel Committee took a fiscally responsible approach when it recommended layoffs as a way to balance the budget. The full board, however, opted to explore position reductions through attrition instead. And that decision does reflect the board's desire to preserve jobs and retain institutional knowledge, even as we continue to address our structural financial challenges. The decision to look at position vacancies versus layoffs led to the creation of these request to fill forms that come before you guys each month. As of today, no decisions have yet been made to hold any positions vacant. But the committee does have an opportunity to pause and do something intentional: strategic workforce planning. Strategic planning allows the committee to ask tough but necessary questions like which roles are mission critical, which processes could be streamlined or restructured, and are departments operating as efficiently as they could be. This kind of planning isn't just about getting lean, it's about being smarter with the tax dollars that we have. So I want to be clear about where we stand today. Despite conversations about attrition, every position brought forward so far has been authorized to fill, and operating expenditures have remained unchanged. To make the 2025 budget work, we relied heavily on our general fund. Specifically, $1.24 million was pulled to cover the gap. This is not a sustainable way to balance our budget. Fund balance is meant for emergencies or one-time needs, not recurring operating costs like wages and benefits. If we continue as we are, keeping all of our positions staffed, maintaining current spending levels, and relying on reserves, we're likely to face the same exact situation when we start the budget process in a few months. We cannot afford to abstain from employee wage increases 2 years in a row, and exit surveys are showing that low wages are one of the top reasons for our high turnover. So now is the time to take action. Strategic workforce planning is a necessity. We must evaluate how we staff, where we can reorganize, and how we can create a path for sustainable wage increases by aligning positions with long-term service needs. Doing nothing will put us back in the same place we were 8 months ago. So that being said, We welcome any feedback, insight, suggestions, or direction from our oversight committee on how we work together to tackle the problem before us.
So are you, when you're saying strategic workforce planning, are you suggesting, hinting that we go through a job justification process for each position? Because that's what,
Efficiency and efficiency investigations.
I don't like that word. It's so hard to measure. Everybody's gonna say everybody's doing the best job they can and they're just great people.
Right, and that's what we've been seeing with some of these request to fill forms that come before you all, is that you're given 40% of the picture.
So how do we change that?
I don't
Because that-
know. That's why we're here.
The only way
That is
to get
definitely a
100%,
problem.
the only way to get 100% of the picture is to wander into areas where we should not go.
Definitely not an open session, correct?
Well, and every,
I'm not saying that. I'm saying
In the
in an open
courthouse, like,
session,
Like spend a day and
we should,
Oh,
chat.
should
the
engage in micromanaging so that we would shadow every single employee in this building and develop a point of view, each of us, as to what kind of job that person is doing.
well, and.
And that is so wrong. It's not even funny.
Well, and even if that was right, I mean, I can stay busy for a full day, one full day.
You what?
You know, I can stay busy for one full day while you're coming.
Of course you can.
everyone would be the busiest they ever could be on that day.
They leave crap go for a week.
this is what we're trying to get at by redefining the job description for the administrative coordinator. So that is that process in place. And I personally, as you know, think that performance reviews could help this situation also.
I have we and I talked about that. I have a mixed point of view on that. There's a large number of private sectors that don't do performance reviews anymore because they've just become stupid. And it's a way for managers to get even. I used to, there was a term, get
What did
even.
you say?
There was a
Yeah,
term,
I mean, it creates that kind of,
yeah.
drinking buddy.
Yeah, right, right. And there used to be a term in psychology, and then we use it sometimes. And you guys don't know what green stamps are, you're way too young. He does. But they took that people used to save green stamps and they trade them in for stuff at the grocery store or other places. My mom did it all the time.
Remember cigarette coupon?
Said cigarette coupons.
I remember green stamp.
You did good.
Yeah.
But some smart psychologists used to took that term and said, people are saving up brown stamps. So when you get in a relationship and you hold all these grudges and you dump them all on whomever all at once, you're saving up brown stamps. Well, that's what performance reviews did a lot of times, to your point, because people don't know how to do them. They hate doing them. They don't want to do them. So they either don't do them, they do them in 5 minutes, or they save up brown stamps because somebody did something that pissed them off and they give them a shitty performance review. And then it goes to the next level of the boss and all that cascades upward.
If you screwed up in January, by December, it's forgotten. If you screwed up in December, you're gonna get a bad review.
Exactly.
So
First of all, thank you for doing this. This is really a sort of a free wage and salary evaluation that you guys did. So thank you. And it's very well done. The question, I don't know the answer. I know the questions,
Well,
which is how do we do it?
for an accountability structure process.
Well, I think the pitfalls of performance reviews, I think Dave and Mike outlined really well. I guess we're coming to you as our oversight committee because we went through layoffs and that wasn't what we were gonna do. We tried to do attrition and we're not doing that. So we've kind of already presented how we feel we can make some cuts to free up money to pay our staff with their work. And not seeing any progress on either of those. So if we're missing something, that's why we're coming to you.
There's only one way to do it, and it's
So let-
job reduction.
Let's go back a couple steps. It seems to me that some of this is, let's say in the last year, has been partially perception versus reality. So in the middle of the year, when the board, I think at the time, made a good decision to just a few steps. That was unplanned. And so there, there's an issue in and of itself. We decided to do something that we hadn't planned on doing. And that decision was based on information that indicated that we had a surplus in our budget.
The prior year,
We did, right?
But we were told,
2023 had a surplus. It's in our audit. Yep.
I mean, the presentation that was made to the personnel committee was that we have a surplus that will cover the cost of this increase. And even sort of intimated that it would cover the effect of that increase for 2025. And then within 3 months, we're suddenly faced with a monumental deficit. That created, to me anyway, somewhat of a crisis in confidence in how information was provided. Not suggesting that anyone was intentionally deceiving us. It's just the juxtaposition of the two issues, one a surplus and then all of a sudden a shortage, raises some questions. So then the initial decision or the initial recommendation about layoffs, that decision or that process was based on the deficit, not on what you're talking about right now, about better planning or having a better handle on what our workforce needs are, right? So we were trying to save money with the layoffs as opposed to adjusting work productivity and maybe making decisions about what kinds of things the county didn't need to do as much of, or we could do them in, spread it out. Instead of people getting an answer to a question in 2 days, they would get it in 3 to 4 days. And, that's how you sort of figure that out. So now we're looking at, trying to make some adjustments. And I think you're right. I think we need to take a look at this. And obviously the question is going to come from is where does the money come from? And is it feasible to save enough money from somewhere else to do that without finding more revenue sources?
Are you
The
talking
other-
about the wage study, the 28, 29 grand?
No, I'm talking about
Just
whatever
overall.
the adjustments that you're going to end up making. If we're gonna address the how far behind we are in wages,
Mhm.
we're gonna have to have money to do that. And, I don't
Okay,
know that,
got it.
I don't see that we've got substantial revenues for that purpose. So then if we can't save enough money somewhere else to do that, then we're gonna have to find new sources of revenue. The other thing, and I don't mean this as a criticism, but we've all been thinking about this whole thing about attrition versus the previous issue of laying people off. We've been looking at this. We came up with the form, which I think was a really good way of evaluating. But from my perspective, we're getting the department heads' wants. And frankly, I would have appreciated a recommendation from administration as to whether these positions should be filled or not. I mean, it was sort of, the department head came in and says what they wanted, and then the committee had to go on what was said and nothing,
To your previous point though about the budget, did you ask? And I don't mean that to sound rude,
What's
but
that?
did you ask
Ask what?
For our
for
recommendation.
our opinion?
Well, you mean about those positions? I'm not sure that if our administrative staff are providing leadership to our committee, I would think that would be a given.
But
You-
it differentiates from the opinion you just gave regarding the budget. You just said that the committee wasn't doing their job asking
Yes.
for updated budget figures.
agree.
So that's different now though with the fill forms.
I think nobody wants to ask. Obviously, you don't want to be the one out of the five guys that says, oh, whatever. But, somewhere along the line, there would be a way of communicating. We have a form that we fill out, which is the department head's recommendation. Maybe and if everybody gets to sign off on that, maybe committee leadership should be providing us with their recommendation as well.
Here's the problem when you don't have anybody in charge of that. So I don't know if you guys remember back to the first couple. Ashley and I had meetings with numerous departments and recommended that they don't fill the positions before we came here. And we asked a lot of really hard questions that, looking back on it, I guess maybe that should have been all played out in public, because we knew what questions to also ask these department heads. And then we checked on the form, not recommended.
Yeah.
And then came here and that wasn't even looked at or asked why we didn't recommend it. And then the department head comes back to us the next day and says, got my way. You guys didn't want to. Like, that stuff is actually happening. And so,
I'm not looking to say anybody here is at fault.
but I'm just
Saying that somewhere along the line, the committee needs to ask more questions and the staff needs to offer more suggestions. And, and that, maybe that's a process that we need to develop a better working relationship, where, to be honest, I think if I were in the staff position, I would want to know that the committee actually wants to know what I have to think or what I think about it. But then, sometimes we have to be more trusting of one another, that we're not going to get clobbered if we ask, or we're not going to get clobbered if we offer. And then also, we're not going to take our doll dishes and go home if our recommendation isn't accepted, or if, somebody doesn't like that, so that seems to me to be a piece of this process that we have to develop. And I know it's easier to let the committee make bad decisions and or not want to jeopardize the relationship with the department heads as well. But somehow this process has to work. And if we're going to, attrition won't work if we just keep approving filling the positions. But most of the ones that I have seen seem to me to be relatively solid needs. I haven't seen too many of them that I would say the departments could have gotten along without them. Maybe one or two. I don't
I
know.
think I'm up to 5.
What's that?
I think I'm up to 5 that I wouldn't have filled.
So to Dave's point, I agree with him. I guess I kind of missed this too, but like these ones today, none of them are signed down on the bottom other than for the department head.
They haven't been for months.
So I guess my point would be going forward, then if they're not signed by everybody that's supposed to fill these in on the bottom, I don't even think we should take them up.
I could go with that.
I mean, everyone should put their recommendation down. There's oversight chair. And then after that, the final signature would be personnel committee chair.
Yeah,
I'd go with that.
I mean, and do we want to do we want to develop some other type of form from administration as to why, maybe a different type of questionnaire, as to why HR or see thinks that we should or should not fill them, a separate thing to look at?
That would not be, some of my thoughts are not for open session.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, I would be more than willing to share that with you, but some of the
I
reasons
understand
don't
that.
speak up are closed session.
I don't,
Could we?
even if you didn't want to do that, I don't want to discuss that level of, because it smacks of performance
Correct.
review. If we're talking,
But if we're looking, okay, so are you saying that would refer to the previous individual or the current department head as to why they may think they need to refill this position, blah, 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 blah?
And I think just other things we see with being here 24/7 that you could talk about as a department as a whole.
Yeah, so like some of the efficiency concerns, I would not want to discuss in open session because I think you can attribute some inefficiencies to a specific person, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Oh, that'll make sense.
Okay.
So do we need to start putting a closed session along with these and the possibility of going into some of these in the future, or?
Yeah, and that becomes tricky though, because if we only put a closed session on the ones that we've got concerns on, then that
Yeah.
tells the public.
Yeah.
I think you can do it as a automatic. And we can have the closed session and say, we don't have any issues and go back into open session and that's it. Or sit around for a while so nobody knows that we didn't have anything. But I know what I mean. I think you would want a closed session because you might not have any recommendations, but some of these members of these committees are also on the other committees. So they might have some opinions.
Are you, when you're talking about your five, Ashley, that you wouldn't have filled?
I think it's, I'd have to go back and look for,
You said five.
oh,
Are you talking about the job that is not needed anymore?
Specific to the position.
Specific to the position, not specific to anybody who may or may not hold that position.
Mhm.
So then we are getting back to your point of,
That's open.
But
yes, correct. So
But she
we
might-
challenge the need for instance, if a position came open tomorrow, we would do our due diligence and say, before we even talk about posting it, we would talk about, do we need it anymore?
But
That position.
But I think you need to, when the closed session would be something where Ashley and Ashley, or the Ashleys, I guess, could tell us what, and they might not agree with each other in that matter, what they think about filling that position.
happens.
And the reasons, and the reason would it have to be in a closed session, because they might not just be talking about whether that position needs to be filled. They might be saying that position doesn't need to be filled because there are other positions in that department that are not at full, performance that could absorb some of those responsibilities.
Correct.
And that needs to be a closed session. And then I think we would also at the same time allow, I think the department head to defend their recommendation. I don't think we want to do those in a vacuum. I think you wouldn't want to.
But that would get at then having more pointed questions that
Yes.
any of us could ask, because we
Right.
don't know what we don't know.
that's where it's hard. You don't know, what to ask.
As far as we know, everybody's busting their butt and doing a great job. Because that's what we're told.
Well, they must be doing
Mushrooms.
pretty good because other counties are hiring.
Well, they must be, yeah. Training everybody for the whole world.
To the bigger point, I think there's more to solving this problem than just attrition. We need to find a way to get the dead weight and to have accountability. So we talk about a position, whether or not to refill a position. That is important, but there's like all these other inefficiencies and we don't, it seems to me, have a very good mechanism to how to fix the people who are not performing, who are not going to leave. And if that person would leave, then, or all of those people would leave, then probably those would be the positions we didn't want to fill because those people aren't actually doing the job. So unfortunately, a lot of the people who leave happen to be the higher performer people who are going other places. We need some sort of a mechanism for accountability and to get rid of the dead weight.
Well,
In addition to the attrition discussion.
I think that's,
In a world where that exists, you would have competent department managers because that's their job. And if the department manager isn't doing it, they need to go.
Right, which is why we need a stronger administrative coordinator to do that, because we as committees can't see that. We don't know that. We
Sure, you need a stronger administrative coordinator.
with the skills, not
The authority to.
not
But I also,
skill thing, the actual tools to do that.
but I also think we need to have a better, if we just dilly-dally along believing that everybody's that's leaving is leaving because for more money. That I just don't believe that's a good practice. When you think about it, I think it's easier to change jobs now than it's ever been. Partly because there's a shortage, but also because of extenuating things. So if you live in Russ County, you're going to take a job in Barron County. You have to factor in driving back and forth every day. You have to factor in does your spouse want to move to Barron County with you, or do you want to stay here? Or, we have quite a few people that don't live in Russ County that work for Russ County, probably for some of those same reasons. So there's a dollar figure there that somebody's looking at, say, okay, is it worth it to drive to Barron every day for $3 an hour more?
I agree with you. It's more than just money. It's because they feel appreciated there more than people feel appreciated here.
I'm not sure that they know whether people are appreciated in Barron County, because there are vacancies in Barron County that we're filling, and we don't know why not everybody that leaves Barron County retired. So they're going elsewhere too. So there's a lot of other reasons why people leave. But I think we need to take a really hard look at that. And, I think Ashley mentioned earlier about culture, or maybe it was Ashley, whichever one. But I mean, we do have a culture situation that I think needs to be looked at. And there are other factors that people, I think people look for other jobs when they're unhappy with their job about other things. Maybe they just don't like the way the job works or whatever. But so obviously if they're going to justify leaving, they're going to have to try to find a job with more money. But I don't think just saying I want to make more money motivates people to want to leave.
That's not the data. You're right. The data suggests that is not a significant driver when people are at a certain level of income. They leave for, the cliche is people don't leave a job. They leave a post.
And we forgot too to mention that we did make an improvement to the benefit package last year. So instead of doing a raise, there was money that went towards the improvements of the HSA contribution.
You should.
that doesn't, unfortunately, it doesn't matter to our incoming employees.
What's that?
Okay, what?
We're seeing that the improvement to the HSA is not does not matter to our incoming employees, especially of a younger generation, because they're in that mindset of, I don't care about that money. I don't need, they're not saving as much as they used to. I mean, our not older employees, but our employees that have been here longer too, and our employees that have families and have medical, like they love that and definitely appreciated that. But a lot of employees that I'm like hiring now and are just of that different generation, like, I'm not saving for my HSA. I want to pay up my college. I don't care what you're giving me for my HSA. I want this or I want that.
Some employees don't take insurance. Get them.
Yeah, we are seeing more of that too, especially those under 26.
When we used to have all the unions, and you kind of knew where the union was gonna go based on who was on the negotiating committee. If there were a lot of older guys on the sheriff's department, they were looking at retirement, they were looking at, the HSA or whatever. If you had a lot of younger people, then they were looking more for cash. So there's all of those factors come into play.
So next step is probably another discussion.
Well, I mean, to
We're not gonna,
we came here asking
Right.
for help because we're spinning our wheels. The level of dissatisfaction with the staff is really at an all-time high. And to Kathy's point, we have a lot of amazing employees in this building. But unfortunately, some of those lower performers are dragging the morale down because there's no accountability at all. And then when your wages are stagnant, it's just kind of stacking and stacking and stacking up. So that's why we came to you. We want direction from the personnel committee. Tell us what to investigate next. Tell us where we could look for cuts. Tell us where we could look for revenue or anything like that, because we are just spinning our wheels at this point.
question you're asking is not any of those. Is it?
We are asking, so moving forward with Cottingham and Butler is not gonna work if we don't have the funding, as Dave said, to back up what they're gonna show us.
That's why it didn't work in the first place, because we didn't really fund it at the level that we should have.
That was like, Jim, what was it, like $1.7 million or something to bring us to market? It was incredible.
Yeah.
And I think if we're gonna fix our scale overall, you would want to find some funds to do that, because the problem that I'm seeing with my internal comp study that I did is it's not, while it goes up as the grades go up, but there's also some positions that are pretty decently on the scale. So maybe not the actual person, but they're pretty decent on the scale and we're not super far behind. But then there's other positions that are 20 to 25% behind. So it's almost like we need to write our scale again and then keep moving it forward. Well, I think that like they would help us to do that.
So these gentlemen suggested that we fully complete the form. We don't consider a form that's not fully completed, and that we add a closed session to every meeting to be able to speak more freely. So why don't we do that first
That's a good first step.
and build from there?
Yeah, I think maybe it's starting to look like it's automatic or whatever. And we probably need to take a harder look at it. And I think, administratively and committee-wise, both ways.
But the other thing is, people aren't prepared to ask the hard questions. Going into a closed session isn't gonna do us any good.
What?
If you're not if we as a group are not gonna be prepared to ask the hard questions, going into closed session won't do us much good.
Let's try it.
Well,
But I think we should try. I agree.
what I will do is I will ask the questions that I think you would ask. And then,
Those are usually
Jim would ask you.
Those are usually the dumb ones. Dave.
Yeah. No, I think maybe as a committee, we need to take a vow and say, we're gonna do a better job. And
Sign the hard questions and talk.
Take a harder look
I
and
don't know questions to ask.
in exchange for that, I think.
Especially if you're not on the committee, it's like you knew some of them because I'm like,
And I do think closed session is obviously appropriate.
We'd almost have to have one for each one of these, would we not?
Yeah, oh yeah, I think it just
Yeah,
becomes
people-
a standard feature for every, it's probably gonna take us longer to muddle through it, But
We can't just do one general one at the beginning.
No, Rich likes them to be specific to
Yeah.
the agenda item.
Why can't we? There to the request to fill form to discuss them. Like a general, you can't, huh?
I don't know, that would be a question for Rich, how he best wants that noticed to the public.
what?
So it's the request to fill form.
Yeah,
So why can't you put closed session on request to fill forms? You know, not specific job, just on the forms. It'd be still jobs, but you know, the forms are submitted, so you could discuss the forms and.
Would have to be on the agenda.
I think it's just gonna be on the agenda. That's for each position that's being,
Okay, for each.
It's just gonna slow things down,
it will,
but that's
but
okay.
that, you know. Taking less time,
Are we taking now, retaking them?
taking less time does not make us efficient.
No, right.
Being thorough and doing a good job trumps efficiency or whatever. If
It's a different word.
I mean, we could call it in if we wanted to take less time, but
It's like I've said before, okay, it's every department head's job to protect their department.
yes,
And they're gonna come in and their mindset is they need that individual and they need that position. And it sucks, but we're gonna have to be the ones occasionally to tell somebody that. It may come. So,
Well, the other thing is you don't have to tell them no either. Like you, hey, let's revisit in 3 months. Like it doesn't have to be not filling this, you know, forever. That could be a decision too that the committee makes. Like we're gonna press pause on this for 3 months or 6 months or
very true.
Irene?
on hiring that specific position. Like you could say like not, you know, let's revisit this one in 3 months. We feel we can delay the hiring, which would still save some stuff in the budget.
I mean, the first one we, that we don't approve is, to check under the hood.
Yeah, that was a great analogy. That car thing was good. I don't know who came up with that, but that was good. That's something us guys can understand and the girls too. I don't wanna.
My HR friends help.
I don't wanna get HR trouble or anything, but, and the other thing I'd like to think about is the bigger question.
Wait, good.
Hmm?
Bigger question.
The boil of the ocean question.
Wage good, and what do we do?
No, it's not wages. It's management competence, expertise, leadership. I do think Dave's point of you giving us a recommendation on the jobs is appropriate since we don't see them every day. But the organizational structure is flawed deeply.
Is this same form being used at the committee oversight or something similar, or is this formally being used at personnel? So what,
Remember, we didn't want them to go to committees because we thought that would delay too much depending on where everything fell to even post the position. It could be 2 months before we posted it.
we do have a spot for a committee or oversight chair.
So they're supposed to call and at least discuss with their chair. The chair isn't making a decision. The chair is just saying recommended or not, because either way, it'll come to you guys to make a decision. So the chair isn't making, you know, the decision. And I think when we talked about implementing the form, a lot of us decided that most likely the chair of the committee isn't gonna say no.
True, but form's the form. They can put their signature on the same as anybody else.
Well, but regardless, it's gonna land here, so they're just gonna pass it through.
And that's part of the problem is that
The oversight
if
committee
we-
should challenge it
Yeah.
first.
if we can pass it on to finance, we
Yeah.
let them decide. So, let them be the guy that
Yeah,
says
nobody
no,
wants to
I
get
think.
shot at it.
But again, I think although we're gonna do it in closed session, I think we want to be out in the open within ourselves. So that we're not talking about the department head when they're not here. And we're not, in other words, that's gonna require a certain amount of frankness and, you know, being open in our discussion, even though it's uncomfortable. I think we will have to do that and hopefully arrive at better decisions. And I think once our department heads in particular understand that we want their best information and we want, you know, that we're trying to be fair and reasonable, I think that we will build more trust.
Yeah.
And we'll get better answers to our question.
Well, and to the bigger point, just so everybody knows, I mean, and everybody knows this, and I'm just stating the obvious, I guess. Any organization,
So,
life is a bell curve, right?
so Connie, you probably remember the good old days
I do.
when we had this period of time was it May and June, where department heads could come in and ask for increases for their employees or for themselves. And then the personnel committee would agonize and go through the contortions of oh, we'd really like to do that, whatever. But there were some that were more than happy to come in and ask, and sometimes they got something. And then there were people who wouldn't come in and ask, but then they would whine and complain about, well, they didn't give, you know, they gave Charlie a raise, but they didn't give me a raise. And so-
Well, but you didn't end up in court every other week.
I remember that at the board because it was like,
Yeah.
well, I mean,
I don't like you.
everyone come through for 30 cents. I'm like,
I remember.
why? And then other people got nothing.
I remember way back when we would have that November board meeting.
Yeah.
And the chairman of the highway committee would rise and say, I make a motion that we give the highway commissioner a $5,000 increase. And somebody from the highway committee would second it. And it would fail 19-5. And then the chairman of the forestry committee would say, I make a motion, we give the forester a $5,000 raise. Somebody from the committee would second it and it would fail 19-5. And it would just go down the line. And then they go back and say, oh man, we tried to get you a raise, but the rest of those guys would, you know, and it would just over and over and over again.
Yeah.
You know, that was a terrible. But
So are we finished for now here?
we should be.
For now, we should be.
Step identified.
So we need
Well, we
to,
didn't get anywhere though with the original point of this discussion, I guess, with the wage thing.
Well, because that's buried beneath a bunch of layers of other stuff.
We ultimately can't.
is this,
Ultimately, we can't do anything about it because the way the state hamstrings everybody north of Highway 29 is ridiculous.
I
Um,
solved that problem.
you did?
Yep.
Are you gonna build a bunch of buildings?
We're gonna rename Highway 2, Highway 29.
There you go. That's a great idea.
Well, there'll be something, oh.
And everything will be
we get a lot
south of
more
We get a
29.
lot more money.
Everything will be south of 29.
Everything will be south 29.
I
Well-
think there's great merit in what's been presented but I think it bears more,
So should we dump this on finance to come up with the funding? Is
bit
that
more.
what you're saying?
a little bit more,
They'll just send
thought
it.
and conversation.
Yeah.
where- How we want to do this
Yep.
and maybe you could call a special meeting and be just for that purpose
I'm thinking about that.
before our regular meeting next month. And then obviously it's probably not going to get on this month's agenda, but for the board, but if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well and right and with deliberation.
I don't think it'd be a bad idea to do the presentation to the board. That you
No,
do.
it was very good.
I mean, even if you don't get a response, it's still good to educate.
Well, that's what we wanted. That's why you brought it up in May too. Our point wasn't to like, hey, let's give us a raise next month. It
So-
was to start the conversations of, hey, this is.
So if you made the presentation to the board, then invited the board to submit their questions or thoughts or concerns to the committee in the interim till before the next meeting?
Could do that.
Cause it's, this is gonna take a group effort.
Yeah.
One committee can pass it, but then if it ends up at the board and then there's no backing behind it.
It's not
through a lot of
go
stuff.
anywhere.
This is pretty major.
One last thing, which is probably bigger picture even yet, is that, and I noticed that we are taking some steps to get more involved in economic development as the county. Because I think that's the other piece of this is where, you know, the comment was made at a previous personnel committee meeting that nobody's looking to figure out ways to increase our revenues, which is maybe something we should be thinking about. But, you know, that's another piece of the thing, and we can't just start talking about how we handle expenses. We need to talk about how the county could improve its revenues, and one of the ways to increase the levy is to increase the equalized value or the valuation, and more economic development and housing and all those other
That's
things
the only way.
that will increase
Increase the levy.
that.
Or yes, you
Yeah.
float a referendum.
That's a large size photograph of that. I say, I have a large size photograph of a referendum passing to,
Do you?
yeah,
To see that? It's the only one in existence.
yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so
Next.
next is the resolution to ratify a collective bargaining agreement with Russ County Jailer and Dispatchers. So I don't know if you guys had time to review the resolution that I put out, but that is exactly what we had talked about in our last union negotiation. So nothing has changed. So what the steps, just for those of you that aren't aware, because I wasn't aware of exactly the steps. So what had happened is the jailer dispatchers did vote on this. They signed the tentative agreement. I've been working with Sean. Sean, our attorney, reviewed all of this. I sent him this resolution based on the tentative agreement he had sent. He said everything looks good to him. So the only thing I'd want to point out is that this would go to the board then. That's been our past practice, is that you guys, I have the resolution there for you guys to sign. We do need somebody to ultimately sign the contract. So I have in here that now therefore be resolved that the board would ultimately approve the 2-year collective bargaining agreement, and the personnel committee chair would sign the said agreement on behalf of the county. I think that's the old contract that I could find. That's what it looked like was done.
Okay. So there's no changes? I don't see a need to go into closed session.
No, the closed session is for the next agenda item to talk about on the
That's the sheriff.
sheriff deputy's contract.
Sorry,
You have a quick update,
did
but
that correctly. I can.
So I guess we just need a-
Yeah.
I will make a motion. We accept this contract
Second.
forward to county board.
and forward to county board.
County board.
Sorry. Yes.
Second.
I'm gonna abstain because
Yeah,
I
you were.
had to do with it. I don't know.
You're due. You're new.
Oh, you weren't in any.
Yeah.
Second it though.
There's no.
There's no harm in that.
Are you too scared to second my motion? It's gonna go on
Seconded.
record.
I was seconded the first time.
They were making it second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We all need to sign this.
You all have you signed this one. You can keep that one in your packet. You can be good.
Good.
The minutes show motion seconded by coercion.
But no physical
Under
harm,
duress.
no physical harm. Heard.
Just no animals were harmed during the testing.
Oh, yours. Yep. And then the closed session would be for the sheriff deputies, if you guys.
Motion to go into closed session.
I will make that motion. And
I will
Jim
second Dave's motion.
There we go.
Motion is second to go into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Stats 19851C for deliberating or negotiating purchasing of public property, C, investing in public funds or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. To wit, update on negotiating Russ County Sheriff's Deputies Union contract.
Yes.
Yes, or Jim,
Goodness,
sorry.
you're gonna offend Dave.
I owe you a beer.
I was gonna say, which one of us is the most
Okay,
offended?
closed session.